A spider crouches in the dark hold of a ship. Its legs grip a beam slick with salt water. Around it, chained hands pass a story mouth to mouth. That spider is not real, but the story is, and it just crossed an ocean. Long before that ship, long before those chains, there was a vault in the sky. A god named Nyame sat on top of every tale ever told. He locked them away, not because they were precious to him, because they were dangerous to everyone else. Stories, in the wrong hands, could turn a slave into a king, could turn a whisper into a revolt, could turn a single voice in a crowded marketplace into the spark that burns an empire to the ground. Nyame knew this. He had watched language reshape the world before, so he kept every story sealed behind golden doors, floating among the stars, guarded by cosmic law. No mortal hand was supposed to touch them. No mortal tongue was supposed to carry them. But down below, in the dense forests of what we now call Ghana, a creature no bigger than a human fist had a plan. His name was Anansi. He was a spider, and he wanted every single story in that vault. Now, the easy thing is to think of Anansi as a kid's character, a cute spider in a folktale, bright colors, simple lessons, bedtime stuff. That would be wrong. Among the Akan people, his tales were told at funerals, where grief needed a frame that teaching alone could not provide. They were told to settle land disputes, where two families arguing over a boundary line would sit before an elder and hear a tale whose lesson pointed toward the just answer. Elders used them to teach young warriors about loyalty and about when to break it, about the moment when obedience becomes being part of the crime. His name carries roots that link to both the networks and the hand, the tool of the maker and the shape of connection. Hundreds of proverbs in the Twi language thread back to his stories. A single phrase, near the web remembers, still shows up in Akan legal councils today. These weren't bedtime tales. They were law, coded in silk. But Anansi wanted more than local wisdom. He wanted all of it, every story that Nyame hoarded. So he climbed, not with brute force, not with an army. He climbed with a question. He asked Nyame to name his price. Nyame laughed. The price was cruel on purpose. "Bring me 3 things," the sky god said. "Capture Python, the great serpent. Trap the hornets who sting without mercy. And cage the leopard, whose pride is sharper than its claws." No one had done this. No one had tried and lived. Anansi went to Python first. He didn't fight. He started an argument. He stood near the riverbank, talking to himself loud enough for Python to hear, saying the snake was not really as long as people claimed. Python slid out furious. Anansi held up a palm branch and asked Python to stretch out beside it, just to prove the point. The snake extended its full length, rigid with rage. Anansi tied it to the branch before Python even realized the debate was over. That's the thing about Anansi. He doesn't overpower you. He makes you defeat yourself. He finds the gap between your ego and your judgment and lives inside it until it swallows you whole. The hornets were next, and they were meaner. You can't trick anger the same way you trick pride. So Anansi changed his method. He scooped water into a gourd and poured it over the hornet's nest. Then he poured water over his own head. When the hornets swarmed out, soaked and confused, Anansi held out a dry gourd and told them it was shelter from the sudden rain. They flew inside. He sealed the lid. No stings, no struggle, just a lie about the weather. The leopard was the hardest. You can flatter a snake, you can fool an insect, but a cat watches. A cat waits. A cat reads the silence between your words and knows when the rhythm is wrong. Anansi dug a pit in the forest and covered it with leaves. Then he spread the word that a great chief had sent for the leopard, that a throne awaited the most regal beast in the land. The leopard walked toward the false royal summons, chin held high, and stepped into the pit. Vanity brought it down. Not strength, not speed. Just the gap between what it believed and what was true. Anansi returned to the sky with all 3. Nyame had no choice. The vault doors cracked open, and every story in creation poured down from the heavens like glowing thread. They fell into the hands of villagers, into the mouths of griots, into the roots of trees and the waves of rivers. For the first time, stories belonged to everyone. The spider had done what no warrior, no chief, no rival god had managed. He had made knowledge free. That should have been the end. The spider won. The god lost. Roll credits. But what no one expected was where those stories would go next. And that part of the journey is darker than any myth. Over the course of 3 centuries, millions of people were torn from the west coast of Africa and forced onto ships bound for the New World. They were stripped of their names, their clothes, their languages. Families who had spoken the same tongue for generations were split apart on purpose and mixed with strangers so that talking would break down, so that solidarity would die in the dark before it ever reached land. But you can't strip a story from a mind that refuses to forget. In the dim, airless holds of those ships, Anansi traveled, not as a spider, as a rhythm, as a whisper passed from one chained body to another in call and response. Captives held what scholars later called web gatherings, quiet sessions where tales were shared in pieces, each person holding a thread. One voice would begin a sentence, another would finish it. The story lived not in any single mouth, but in the space between them. These weren't just comfort stories. British naval logs from that era mention web gatherings at nearly a dozen ports. The logs treat them as minor hassles, gatherings to be broken up. The officers miss the point entirely. Those gatherings were keeping a culture alive inside the machine, built to destroy it. Every tale of a small spider outsmarting a powerful god carried a second meaning. You are small. They are large, but you have something they don't. You have a plan. And the plan does not require permission. Now you might hear that and think it sounds like modern scholars reading politics into old fables. That's the obvious pushback. Just stories. Just fun. And it's not a foolish argument. But then you run into the poem. In Jamaica, a scholar named Simone Lewis decoded a long poem used as a signal during a revolt. The verses mapped directly onto Anansi story patterns, using animal characters to mark locations, times, and battle moves. And diaries from a mutiny in Guyana reference the phrase, Anansi's web tightens. These aren't later readings. These are words written by hands that were there. The stories were weapons. They carried secrets in a form that overseers could not decode because the overseers had never bothered to learn what the stories meant. Once the tales reached new soil, they changed shape. That's what stories do. They adapt, the way a vine wraps around whatever structure is nearest. In Jamaica, the forest in Anansi's tales became a cane field. The animals shifted to match the local landscape. The trickster's voice picked up Creole rhythms and British colonial slang, twisted together into something new that belonged to neither origin but served both. In Suriname, Anansi merged with an older local figure called Sihu. Most of the tales collected there blend both traditions into a single thread. The spider didn't demand that other cultures erase themselves. He wove himself into what was already there. And then the spider lost his legs. Somewhere along the coast of the American South, Anansi stopped being a spider and became a rabbit. The cunning stayed, the humor stayed. The moral stayed, but the shape shifted to fit a land where spiders didn't carry the same mythic weight. Most of the early Burra rabbit stories can be traced back to Anansi. Same plot, same trick, same lesson, different fur. The Tar Baby episode, for example, mirrors an Anansi tale about a sticky figure placed on a path to trap the careless. The structure is almost the same, only the costume changed. But here's where the thesis meets its limit. Anansi's power comes from being the underdog, the small creature nobody sees as a threat. That only works when the trickster is, in fact, small. In groups where Anansi tales became the main culture, Rather than rebel code, the edge dulled. When you are the loudest voice telling the story, the rebellion fades. The tale becomes tradition. Tradition can harden. It can become decoration instead of disruption. This doesn't erase the power of those shiphold whispers. It just shows that the trick works best in the dark, when the odds are worst, when no one is watching the spider because they are too busy watching the door. Still, Anansi keeps showing up. Toni Morrison wove his presence into her novels, using the spider as a frame for the act of storytelling itself. The idea that narrative is not a luxury, but a survival tool. Neil Gaiman gave him a suit and a sharp tongue, calling him Mr. Nancy in a story about old gods surviving in modern America. Gods who endure not through worship, but through the tales people still tell about them. And then there's a teenager in red and blue, swinging between skyscrapers on silk threads. Spider-Man's creators have noted the web of influence that runs back through folklore, back through trickster myths, back to a small spider with a big mouth and a bigger plan. The through line is not a coincidence. It is a thread that has never been cut. There's a study from a university in Costa Rica that tested what happens when children hear trickster tales before solving problems. Most of them scored higher than the control group. The researchers noted that the children didn't just try harder, they tried differently. They came at obstacles from odd angles, tested guesses, looked for the hidden door rather than pushing against the locked one. The stories didn't teach them answers. They taught them that answers can come from strange places, that the obvious path is not always the best one. And that brings us back to the hold of that ship. The salt water, the darkness, the hands passing a story from one voice to another. If you think about it long enough, you realize something strange. Nyame lost the contest, but the stories didn't just fall to earth and stay there. They kept moving, across water, across languages, across centuries. Every time someone tried to lock them away, burn them, silence them, they found a new mouth, a new shape, a new thread. The vault in the sky was only the first prison. There have been many since, none of them held. If this story pulled you in, the next one goes deeper into the myths that shaped empires. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Somewhere right now, a thread is being spun. Not from silk, from a voice in the dark, telling a story that was never supposed to survive. And it's still here,